Hey everybody, welcome back to a brand new episode of Southern Woke. I'm Kaylin.
And I'm Marina. And y'all, I can't wait to tell you everything that this episode offers. Okay, so recently on June 12th of this year, there was a UFO/alien disclosure press conference held by our near and dear Dr. Stephen Greer. I did not even expect that to rhyme. Whom we have mentioned almost any time we've mentioned aliens before on this podcast. He's collected. I know. He has collected an archive of testimonies from whistleblowers who have come face to face with aliens, UFOs, advanced technologies, and illegal secret government operations. Today I'm going to recap what took place at the press conference and what it means for the future. So I'm basically giving you guys and Kaylin, because he didn't watch this, so I am giving everyone a press conference on the press conference. So
a press squared conference.
Yes. Dr. Greer, if you haven't heard us talk about him, is the world's leading authority on the subject of UFOs or UAPs, advanced energy and propulsion systems, and has gathered an extensive intelligence archive of compelling evidence on the subject of extraterrestrial intelligence and covert government projects that are being run illegally. Over the course of the last 30 years, he has provided briefings for sitting U.S. presidents such as Clinton, senior government officials across the globe, and has conducted countless media interviews and hundreds of lectures. He has identified 700 high-level government and corporate whistleblowers willing to testify regarding the UFO issue. In this event, Dr. Greer presented extraordinary cases with live government whistleblower testimony exposing the existence of the illegal secret government, the state of the UFO disclosure in Washington, D.C., and so much more. I cannot wait for Kaylin's reaction to some of these videos. Oh my god.
I just don't know what to expect. You keep saying that, and last thing we saw was like the pregnant alien last time we talked about aliens on the show.
Oh no, we're not talking about no pregnant aliens this time. It's much more sinister than that. Okay, so Dr. Greer begins by reminding us that there is an official law where the government has mandated the Pentagon, which serves as the headquarters of the U.S. Department of Defense, to research and report back to Congress on these issues. But clearly, that's not working out too well. So Dr. Greer's people recently handed over some damning evidence to Congress and the White House containing 145 top secret facilities and bases on a map, and 3 of them are in Louisiana, so have fun with that, Kaylin. But another one is in the same freaking city I live in Fort Smith. It's called Fort Chaffee. Dr. Greer then listed many conclusions derived from 30 years of research extracted from the Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive, including all whistleblower testimony. These are just a few. ETs aren't hostile to humans or Earth, but they are increasingly concerned about human hostility and weapon systems such as nuclear and scalar. An extremely secret organization has been running these projects without legal constitutional government oversight since the late 1950s. It's called the ISG, or Illegal Secret Government, and they operate purely off of bribery, blackmail, and intimidation. When you think of does the president know about aliens? No. Since the 1950s, truly the presidents have no clue what's really going on. So Dr. Greer then went over his White House / executive branch recommendations, because the whole goal here is to make it to where these illegal governments can't get away with these things anymore, and that they have to report to Congress and the president and the executive branch to keep them in check. But we're not there yet. So the recommendations he gave is presidential executive order to immediately stand down all targeting and attacks on ETVs, or extraterrestrial vehicles. Executive order requiring all members of the ISG to disclose to Congress and the White House all information, material, technologies, and locations of UFO-related assets. If not complied with in 6 months, offending parties will be prosecuted and tried for treason against the U.S. Executive order to require the State Department and Pentagon to coordinate a global, diplomatic, and peaceful response to ET civilizations. Executive order to immediately disclose advanced energy generating technologies like zero point, quantum vacuums, and plasma generators for peaceful use. Immediate Department of Justice and FBI investigation into illegal operations related to UFOs, both government and private, including prosecution for embezzlement, kidnapping, witness intimidation, murder, treason, and other serious crimes. So these are just like cute little things they've been getting away with all this time. Now we're getting into the good stuff. So the first whistleblower to take the stand was retired Colonel Donald Heckert, who was a part of the U.S. Air Force. He spent 11 years in high-altitude aircraft developed by the Lockheed Skunk Works. And if you listen to alien conspiracies often, stuff like this, you've heard of Skunk Works probably, but if you haven't, this is the company that is responsible for a number of aircraft designs, highly classified research and development programs, and exotic aircraft platforms. So in the late 70s and early 80s, Colonel Heckert commanded the nation's largest nuclear monitoring facilities and radiological processing lab, and was responsible for the airborne collection of debris from nuclear explosions worldwide. What a damn job. Later, he was commander of classified operations in the Middle East and subsequently served as a special project director at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, where he was involved with countless classified development operations. He also spent time working at Area 51, where he conducted flight operations and project management and research. Here's his story of his encounters with UFOs.
I'll make sure it's available, but these are the two airplanes that I flew that had UFO encounters. The first one was during the latter stages of the Vietnam War. I was flying an operation called Linebacker 3 going into Laos. I was in an orbit at 14,500 feet just south of the Laotian border, and my two armed escorts, because the RF is unarmed and they're there to protect me, were delayed on takeoff. So I'm doing just a racetrack type of orbit. There are things that monitor in warfare called GCI sites. These are radar sites that vector in the fighters to the people that are intercepting you. What happens next is that I get an alert from 3 GCI sites and the early foreman AWACS that I've got traffic that is a fast mover near Mach 1 coming out of North Vietnam, Laos, heading for me in orbit. That concerns me because my armed escort isn't there. Now I'm completing about halfway down this next pathway, and they tell me, oh, don't worry, that target is above 70,000 feet, and you know it can't get at you at this point. So I'm a little relieved, but then I finally get to see it, and it's on a wavelength of light that I've only seen one other place, and that is in a nuclear pile on an active nuclear power generation, and it's called Teller light. It is very unique, very white, very, very bright. So we look up, and it's an 11 o'clock, and over here off my left shoulder about 10 o'clock. My backseater is stumbling to make their emergency detection systems and our defensive systems active. We watch this thing, and it's way above there, and I'm a little relieved until all of a sudden, through the mid-term of the orbit, it comes from 70,000 feet down to 12,500 feet in 2 seconds. And now it's tracking off my nose and staying at 5 nautical miles away. That sets off everything in my aircraft. The 3 GCIs and the AWACS are really concerned about me at this point. And as we go on parallel with this thing flying at 5 miles an hour, I'm really concerned. And then they ask me, will you intercept this if you can? Well, the airplane, the RF-4C, is a Mach 2 plus airplane. I've been in flight for a little while, and so I probably, if I go to afterburner, only have about 15 minutes of fuel left. But I agreed to intercept. The reason I did was I have a new one-of-the-kind IR infrared sensor, but it's on the bottom of the airplane. So my backseater and I agree, hey, this is important. We can see this. We need to document it. I go to afterburner, and we accelerate very quickly through Mach 1, go up to about Mach 1.2, and I close to within 3 nautical miles of this UFO. And we've got it now on our radar. We've got it pegged. The guy in the back seat can't see it on his display because that sensor's pointing down. So I pitch up, do a supersonic climb up, and he says, we got it, we got it, we got it. That white light at 3 miles goes out of sight within less than 2 seconds. And they say, don't worry about it. It's above 80,000 feet in those 2 seconds. I go back to the home base because I'm out of fuel, land, all that material, all the mission material is confiscated, and I'm told, don't talk about it.
That is wild. First of all, there's no way that is anything like man-made that is traveling at those speeds. Like, there already 100% has to be an alien.
Yeah, although after hearing some of the things that I heard in this press conference, I wouldn't be surprised if humans figured it out from reverse engineering a UFO, but...
Oh yeah, maybe it's like man-made and like with the assistance of alien technology, but it's not anything that we just came up with.
Exactly. So, like you were hearing at the end of that, he wasn't happy with just being told, don't talk about it, and just go on with your life. Act like that didn't happen. So he ended up calling the senior controller that was on duty at one of those GCI sites. And the guy on the phone, he's like all excited about it. Like, hey, this is the dude that was up there. And then all of a sudden he hears the guy on the phone say yes, sir, to someone, and then just automatically hangs up. So that's just the medium rare story of the bunch. Okay, we got to build up here.
Are we building up towards well done? Because that's like the worst of them all.
Honestly, I don't even remember what the order of like power these were in. But the next one we're going to talk about is Michael Herrera, who was a U.S. Marine Corps soldier. Is that what we call them? He was... Anyways, it was in Indonesia in 2009. His unit at the time was the most decorated infantry battalion in the entire Marine Corps, and they were called in to do humanitarian assistance operations in the Philippines, which was an operation... it was called Operation Kitsano. During the operation, they heard about a tsunami and earthquake hit the western part of Sumatra, which is in western Indonesia. Out of all the ships that were out there, the one he was on, the USS Denver, was the only ship routed to that location for help. They boarded a helicopter and flew to the city of Patang, and once on the ground, they walked to a high ground to get a better view of everything. And here's what happened after they got to high ground.
Ammunition we've got, as well as the weapons that we got, which were only M16A4s. So at that point, we decided to push forward. We trekked up about 300 meters. At this time, I have a Panasonic camera that has the ability to take photographs. It has a ability to take videos, obviously. When we got to this high point, I was taking video camera, and I had actually turned to the north, which just kind of slopes down. And right there was something that stuck out like a sore thumb, especially with jungle terrain, things like that. Vegetation, very green stuff, was something that stuck out so well. It's always going to be basically imprisoned in my mind for the rest of my life, and it has been for 14 years, was something that was rotating, and it was transitioning between colors like a light matte gray, as well as a dark matte black. So in between, that's what it kept, and it was very smooth. We had all looked at each other as we got online, and we decided to investigate. The further thing I want to say is that I actually took pictures and video of this before we actually trucked down. We had a dump pouch where we basically, if we expend ammunition, we want to retain our magazines, so we put those there. So I dropped my camera in there, and we decided to go down. We didn't have any communications, which was weird, and that was a very odd thing, and it's something that either could have been good that we didn't, or it could have been something that could have been very bad. And it just however you want to look at that. Once we got down this slope, we were approximately 150 meters away from this craft. When we all got to the point where we could see it, just like behind here, again, Mr. Schratt, phenomenal job. You can see that the craft here actually was roughly about 300 feet. And the reason why I know this is because you could fit 3 of the helicopters that we flew in on underneath this craft. It was rotating a clockwise motion. The panels here that you see, the black ones, at least 3 of them, was like a Vanta black, very dark. I have no idea what that was. On the very top, there was like a pyramid structure that you could see the shadowing of it, which would elicit that was a pyramid structure. And it had an audible hum to it, kind of like a guitar amp if you were to unplug that, or like a transformer. It's very audible. If I was to hear that sound again, I could tell you, okay, it's probably this thing or something similar to that. It's very distinct. And the way that it was floating, which was about 10 or 15, 20 feet off the ground, it was kind of a very eerie thing to see because I've never seen anything like that in my life. When we got up to that point, we were then intercepted by a team of soldiers or rogue military force, if you will. The most concerning thing about this is they all had American dialects. They had American gear. They had OTVs, black. They had black camouflage. They had very similar setups to what we have, but more high speed, something what you would see special operation groups these days have. They had no insignias on. They had no ranks. They had nothing that would signify who they were. They had black ball caps. They had M4A4s that were equipped with ACOGs, which was a step up from what we were currently issued, as well as PEC-16 IR illumination devices that you use for night vision and night patrols, things like that. So we were engaged. We had 8 of them put the drop on us. You could audibly hear them blow the safety selectors off. They basically started screaming at us, telling us what we were doing. We were not allowed to be there. Who were we with? What were we doing there? Threatened that they could kill us right then and there. We could get lost in the jungle. They could throw us out of a helicopter if they needed to. It was very nerve-wracking at that point, especially looking to my fellow Marines and seeing the reactions on their faces too. We were all freaking scared, to say none the less. So with that being said, each Marine was then patted down along with myself. We had our weapons taken from us. They were basically cleared in condition 4, which means they had no round chamber, no magazine in. They dumped our magazines out of our mag pouches as well into the deck. And then again, because of Marine Corps order, how things are with that, we were told to keep our military ID in our left breast pocket. So they knew that. They asked for our military identification. We gave it to them, obviously, because they have guns in our face. So provided that to them. They had something that looked like modern day smartphones, but this is 2009, so it's not really as high tech compared to obviously today. So they took some pictures of our military ID, and then they had something that remind me of a BAT system, which is a biometrics tracking system that we would use. This is for insurgents or anything, things like that. It would take fingerprints, it would take retina scans, it would take pictures of them and document them. So if there's other militaries that were coming to relieve our post, they would actually have this information too to know who they are dealing with. That's what it reminded me of, and I had trouble scanning the IDs. As this is going on, we're going back between these guys as well as what's going on in the background. At that time, there was 4 of these trucks, which were F-350s. They were up armored. They were pretty beefy. They had weapon cases that I've seen before because of something that we've actually loaded weapons into. They had 2 of them that were in the back of each truck. They also had these containers that was illustrated right here, which come to find out through recent revelations from yesterday from somebody who came forward to Dr. Greer. I don't know who they are, but what they had told him and what he has told me is that this gentleman knows exactly what these were used for, because they had like a cylinder on the front, which is either for oxygen or what I hypothesized was for vacuum sealing, which lead me to suspect that they were smuggling narcotics or drugs. Come to find out, disturbing than that, this gentleman has firsthand account with this and says that it was for people. It's very disheartening, especially because that part of the world have already gotten ravaged, and it's something that is very hard to see right now because of what I've witnessed, and it's very disheartening. And this is why I'm up here. So they loaded these onto this platform that you can see right there, and as I got up there, like I said, I was going back and forth. These guys are still searching our stuff. They're still, pointing their weapons at us. And after the last 2 trucks that I saw that actually got onto that platform unloaded, they had 4 guys in each truck that would unload everything. However they did it, I can't tell you because, again, I was focused on this as well. And these trucks drove off. As that happened, this platform actually rose up off the ground itself. The top part of the craft actually met it down in the middle like this, and it formed into one solid piece. It floated right above the tree line. As soon as it was able to break that tree line, it actually had on the corners of each of these, which was an octagonal shape craft, by the way, on each corner, it emanated a light. It was either red, yellow, green, or blue. Only those 4 colors I can distinctly remember. It didn't make any additional high-pitched sounds when it rose up. Once it got past that tree line, it shot over to the left, basically where the ocean was, at so fast, I would estimate probably 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 miles an hour instantaneous like that. There was no rotor wash, no exhaust that would disturb the trees, vegetation. The coconuts that were on these trees were not even touched. It produced no sonic boom. This thing was so fast.
So there you have it, folks. That's smuggling humans.
I want to know, for what purpose, though? Because there's so many, ways that you could look at that. Because, why... I don't know why it came into my mind, human trafficking for a second.
That's exactly what it implies, or human slave work or something like...
That is what... Okay, I was making sure I wasn't, getting totally off track here, but... And it's kind of wild because, for this guy to get up on stage and say all this stuff after he was, threatened by these people in this way that are still out there, that takes some balls.
Exactly. It's because Stephen Greer... He's just so lovable. Everyone believes him, and he is the leader of this whole thing. And he never meant to be. That's the funny part. He just figured out some things when he was an ER nurse or surgeon, and then went and talked to some people, and here he is. Okay, so after that craft so quietly got the fuck out of there, the bad guys then handed the good guys back their weapons and escorted them back in the direction that they came from. And they were telling them things like, you're not allowed to look back, don't talk about it. All the while, some of the other guys, the bad guys in the background, were saying stuff like, should we just smoke them now? And this just freaked the good guys out. So they just took off and ran to their base and didn't say anything about what happened when they got back, and waited for the flight back to their ship, where they were debriefed by a man they had never seen before. A few days later, Michael Herrera was out having like a little free day from their base, I guess. But they would always go back to the ship to sleep and stuff. And I lost my place. When he returned to his room on the ship that night, his camera was on his bed with the memory card and battery taken out, and his camera, before he left, was like locked up in a little cubby, like tucked under things. So someone knew exactly where to go get it, and like that he had things on there that need to be taken. Then one day he was called to a meeting, and when he showed up, there was no one in the building except one man wearing Air Force dress blues without a name tag, and he said, "You're not allowed to tell anyone in your chain of command. I don't care if it's your general. I don't care who it is. You can go to prison or you can be killed." And then he slid over an NDA that he had to sign.
I couldn't imagine like seeing something like as wild and insane and life-shattering as that, and then not being able to talk about it. You're supposed to just go on like living your life and like having deep conversations with people. Like,
yeah, it's not easy, I would assume. So our next guy is named Stephen Digna Jr. He was in the U.S. Army in Fort Irwin, California. He's a former sergeant, and he began his active duty service in 1999 and served until 2002, and he was working in management for live fire operations, where he acted as a hub between the operations group, intelligence planners, the ground team, Air Force, and Star Wars programs. Apparently we have Star Wars programs. Here's his story of a craft that he saw.
Thank you, Doctor. In July of 2001, I was observing a live fire practice at a level from an observation deck at approximately 3 stories high from the desert floor. I saw a craft in the distance at approximately 200 feet off the ground, measuring approximately 172 feet across, strongly resembling a hovering B-2 Spirit. Upon first glance, my eyes were adjusting to the darkness. I could see 7 lights in a V shape. After that, I closed my eyes for approximately 30 seconds to allow them to adjust to lighting conditions. We were running red lights throughout the bunker due to the current live fire exercise. The range was hot. That means rounds are being fired and lives are at risk at all times. This was interrupted by a very, very ominous call, a net call. It said ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire. Came from one of our observer controllers on the ground. There's about 27 teams out there. And they kept soldiers alive and trained them. Sorry, thank you, Doctor. Once my eyes adjusted, I could make out the general shape of the craft. There were 2 men from Raytheon present. I pulled out my night vision goggles to get a better look at the craft. It appeared to be generating 7 lights along its wings and underbelly. I noticed another smaller craft oriented on the right side and at the same height as the first craft, approximately 75 feet to 100 yards to its right. The second craft was jet black, V-shaped, pointed towards the first craft. This craft had equally joined, spaced, rectangular sections forming the hull. The craft had a gimbal rack that deployed from the bottom of the craft. Approximately 5 to 6 holographic lights, holographic emitting lights were pointed directly at the first craft. That was my assumption due to the fact that they were displaying a strange color within my MVG goggles. Anyone that knows the old school, circa 2000 MVGs, they don't emit color. They give you green, grays, and blacks. I was seeing colors within my night vision goggles. This was not normal. And it was my assumption that perhaps this was a hologram being projected from the other craft. I can't confirm that. However, that was my assessment at the time and my suspicion at the time. I wanted to throw a baseball at it, but I didn't have one, just to see if it was tangible and solid. The second craft was jet black, V-shaped. I'm sorry, jumped a little space here. Thank you for the bullets, Raven. The craft and the gimbal rack were deployed from the bottom of the craft and approximately 5 or 6 lights. Sorry, Dr. Greer. Guys, I goofed up, and that's a part of the brain injury. suffered during the explosion on the live fire range. One of the two men on the observation deck from Raytheon noticed the night vision goggles I had. He went from chattering cheerfully. They were pretty relaxed. They'd seen these before. It wasn't abnormal to them. He looked at me with a very, very severe look of disapproval and anger that I had. At that point, they both went calmly inside, probably a little bit angry, and it felt like as though I had crossed the line. I took another look with my night vision goggles. The reason this event was not reported was due to the fact that it was not unidentified. I'm going to repeat this very clearly to the cameras. This craft was not unidentified. This was one of our birds, and to the observer controller that called that out on the range, I'm not going to put his call sign out. Roger up, eyes on, hands on confirmation. That's our bird, but she doesn't need wind to get lift. She was hovering stationary. This was, I'm going to interject here. Sorry, guys. This was very dangerous. This craft showed up unscheduled. I got no notification. My job was to maintain command and control and to be the hub and top observer controller for the Tactical Operation Command Center for live fire desert warfare. That's the largest live fire warfare center for desert warfare on the planet and in history.
So a few days after that experience, him and his wife went out, saw some movies, and were driving back to the base one night when he saw a powerful white light in his rearview mirror that had popped up over the canyon he just drove through and was zipping through following his path. Then all of a sudden, that white light was coming in through all the windows and engulfing the car. And at that exact moment, his car died, and in front of them was a floating craft. He got out of the car and ran to the front, where he says he stepped through a thick field of plasma. And I have no idea what that could possibly even look like, feel like. I don't know.
Same.
But this plasma is pretty intrusive, because then his wife gets out of the car to yell at him to come back, and then she looks like frozen in place all of a sudden. And he hears a voice just like in his head tell him that she's in stasis lock from that same plasma field. Whatever the hell that means. So, and then he just assumes, oh, well, she's safe right there. So he got closer to the craft. He reached out to touch it, and it responded to the touch as if it was like an animal or something, just like a little reaction. And when he would rub his hand one way, it was super smooth. But if he would rub it in the opposite direction, it felt like a cat's tongue. And as he would rub in that opposite direction, it was like little pieces of like pixels or micro shavings were flying off. And then this happened. I'll let him tell the good part. $139.46 to $145.30.
As I drew my hand back, a lattice work opened up underneath. There was a very vibrant colors coming out of the craft, the underskin. This was a very thin nano layer, and there was a meshwork, honeycomb style, and it was like a lattice work that was like a frame around this. Beneath that was, there were filaments flowing. They looked like a neural network. I tried to see any universal bus system or any computer systems as the analyst job that I had. I saw none of this. As I drew the hand closer to myself, trying to peer through all these bright, wicked, beautiful lights that were pinks, blues, and every light color you could think of in the spectrum, I wasn't able to see anything through it. So as I drew my hand this way, I kind of pressed off the vehicle. The vehicle was stable. I mean, this thing was locked in position. It's not like Star Wars when you jump off of something and it moves. This thing was solidly locked in place, solid. I seen a shape right here through my elbow as I leaned my face down, and I could see up into the sky above my car a mirage, which was like a silhouette or a heat foil on the road. And the stars shimmered in a straight line, and in a very long distance there was a curve. So it seemed to be curved. Either way, right when that ripple hit in the sky, The stars then refixed back into place. I realized I was looking at a cloaking device on a very, very, very large craft that seemed to encompass the whole desert area that I was under. At that moment in time, I glanced and panned my view just to try to get fathom the dimensions of this craft. And I saw a giant bright white light floating in the sky. And it was a hangar bay door opened. You couldn't see doors. It was just a bright white light. And it looked like a window floating through the sky, maybe even a portal. People might, from a distance, think, hey, that's a portal, but I obviously knew it was a craft. So this is a hangar bay door. And there was a female silhouette standing there. At that moment in time, I heard that same voice, and it said very clearly, you were not supposed to see that. That you weren't supposed to see it. All of a sudden, I began feeling a thud, thud, thud sound. This was a resonant frequency being pulsed through my body. As I felt this, it increased in speed. Thud, 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 thud. It was very rapid. You can see the same type of thing in the movie Interstellar. Very similar when he falls through the black hole. Too similar. As this thud resonated in my body, I felt my my cells, maybe the quantum level of my body, feel like it was being resonated. I felt like maybe I'm going to be microwaved or something to that nature. Either way, I seen some bands coming through. I began lifting up off the ground. My vehicle began lifting with me also. As this happened, my body tipped back and I could see the underbelly of the craft. You're going to see that design right in front of you. The rectangular shape right in the center there looked like a docking socket for an electrical port. If you're going to take a big male end, this would be the female receiving end for an electrical charger. To skip through that, there were some there's some highlighted parts here. And as you can read them there, I'm going to let you read that for yourself just for time's sake. However, as this happened, instantaneously, I cued in and I was flat on my back and I was staring up at the ceiling and my vision cued into a very, very bright white light. My vision panned over and there was my wife flat on her back on a table. It was smaller than the table I was laying on, slightly lowered, and she still had the same exact expression on her face like she was screaming no. However, she was no longer stuck in the running position. She was flat.
So yeah, homie got abducted. Somewhat.
Why does that sound like every alien encounter that we've ever heard? Like, I mean...
Because maybe everyone we've ever heard is actually real.
I know, and that's what I don't like.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
But, that's so scary. I don't like the fact that like all that technology could exist. Like, it's cool, but it's horrifying at the same time. Especially if like what they're saying is right and it's in the hands of the wrong people.
Very much so. Very much so. So, just keeping on trend like this press conference, it ran 3 hours long, which was way longer than they were like supposed to go on. And this episode is turning out the same way. So, I'm gonna pick the last most like heavy hitting story. And this one will come from a man named Eric Heckert, who was a Raytheon contractor in the South Pole. And if you haven't heard of Raytheon before, it's like a company that makes missiles. And what he said is like so important, I feel like, and kind of ties in with the whole HARP thing. And he had to be brief because just like this podcast, time was running out in the conference. But I want us to listen to like his story. It's only like 5 minutes or 4 minutes, but what he says, he just like kind of comes up to the mic, drops a bomb, and fucking and that's it.
Leaves.
Mm-hmm.
I will start, since we have to be brief. I have already given all pertinent information and supporting documentation to the Senate Intelligence Committee and AARO. They informed me that all of my information will be recorded for public record and shared with Congress. It is that important. In 2010, I was selected to go down to the South Pole Station in Antarctica for an entire year by Raytheon Polar Services as an employee of a third-party contractor for the National Science Foundation. I functioned in a dual-role capacity as a tradesman and a firefighter. My responsibilities required me to be more informed than most of my crew and offered me complete access to the facilities. What I learned from this unique experience needs to be shared with the entire world. The technology at the South Pole Station certainly can do what it is presented as its primary purposes, and unfortunately, much more. The Ice Cube Neutrino Detector is presented as a passive listening device for the purposes of the science as presented. But I'm going to skip right through the chase, folks. I have provided documentation that proves that the 5,160, what they call DOMs, that are embedded in the ice can actually transmit at 2,047 volts each. That gives us a long list of things to consider. It is effectively a multifaceted directed energy weapons platform that I will list rapidly a few things that it can do. Vehicle detection. We're learning that these off-world craft, on-world craft, ours or other nations, are also emitting neutrinos. So this makes the South Pole Station effectively an air traffic control station for this new level of equipment that nobody's discussing. In addition to the ability to detect neutrinos and the exotic vehicles, I have provided documentation that shows that this is also a system for faster than light communications. In the past, Gary McKinnon has hacked NASA, found the off-world fleet, the list of captains, and it's apparent that if we have faster than light vehicles moving throughout this system, we're going to need faster than light communications. This is that facility. Unfortunately, I have other bad news. The season that I was there, 2010 to 2011, we converted from construction to operations and maintenance in both the elevated station and the detector array. Unfortunately, when they first fired it up, that was when we had the earthquakes in Christchurch, New Zealand. There was 2 incidental shots before they were able to target it correctly. This is an earthquake generating device as well. This is the weapons of war that we have to deal with now and what Raytheon's hiding. There's an ELF system at the South Pole Station that when I arrived, I was told it was off, dismantled, and completely defunct. In my work, I will rapidly just tell you, I had to figure out the circuitry for certain other repairs, and I found that this system is in fact completely energized, up and running, and being utilized with the other systems for nefarious purposes as well. The Atmospheric Research Observatory is in what we call the clean air sector. I witnessed myself a very powerful green laser shooting out of the top of this facility into the cosmos. This, I believe, is a secondary form of long-range communications and or a defense system. I am not saying that we need to be scared of anything that's out there, but please understand the military-industrial complex is happy to invest all of your money in alleviating their fears. A question of power comes into play for all of these facilities that are present. I assure you, I knew what was going on. I knew the load demands of the facility, and all of these new items exceed the demand for the systems that I was presented. I am doing due diligence and research. I believe there is either a secondary power supply there that is either nuclear, that was there prior to the start of the Antarctic Treaty, which prohibits such things, and or that there is some sort of exotic power supply system there that just is not in the verbiage of the treaty, so it negates the responsibility to the parties involved. I think that pretty much covers it for time. If anybody wants to find out more, I have a website where all this information is at. For brevity, I'll wrap.
So,
Of course it's in Antarctica.
and of course it's generating earthquakes.
That's crazy that we just talked about HARP and how like that very well could be a thing, and then this comes out. What?
Mm-hmm.
HARP ain't sounding
And-
so crazy now, huh?
Nope. And I wish we could go over absolutely everything that was mentioned in this press conference, but it was just mind-blowing, dude. Mind-blowing. And like the parts that you don't hear is like usually at the end of them doing their little story, they get like super emotional and talk about what a hard time it was. One dude was ready to just like end it all before he sent his letter to Dr. Greer. Like, it's effed up. What so many guys, like, you think you're honestly, I don't even know. Like, do they like breed these illegal secret government boys from a young age and make it so secretive? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, because like eventually there has to be like one whistleblower like in that group, or like one person that gets pissed off with them and comes out and he didn't get the promotion to like alien commander, chief 2 of the illegal secret government, and so now he's pissed and he goes and like spills the beans. Like, you mean tell me that hasn't happened yet?
I mean, that's basically what all these people are doing. I mean, I don't know. But it's wild to think about. Like, and they're telling the government, like, yo, if you don't, like, prosecute these people within the end of the year, we're filing a RICO Act lawsuit, which I think RICO stands for racketeering, illegal, corrupt organizations or something like that. And they've got like over 90 lawyers ready to represent all the whistleblowers, present all the evidence. Like, they got their shit together. And you can like go to their website and look at all the other stuff. Like, it's insane. Insane.
I'm excited to see what ends up happening because, yeah, like the government can't just like ignore this one at this point. Like, there's just some crazy ass accusations being thrown out with a ton of backing and supporting, and the law is being brought into it now. So like, there's no way they can just be like, oh, we'll just keep ignoring them and saying that they're crazy.
Yeah. So there's a lot about to happen, hopefully, in the world of alien disclosure. And I just hope it's all good.
All right, y'all. Well, that is about all the time that we have for today. Make sure that y'all go check out our TikTok, our Instagram. We post a bunch of cool content on there. And remember to subscribe to us on YouTube. We're trying to hit our first big goal of 1,000 subscribers.
Yep. It would mean so much to us. And as always, come back and join us in 2 more weeks for another episode.
All right. Later, y'all.